cannot invent and pioneer if you cannot accept failure.
We wanted people that were insanely great at what they did.
Nobody was making any money at all. Most people thought the internet was going to be a fad.
All right. Today on the podcast, I have the CEO and co-founder of Proven Skincare. And for people that don't know, this company is a rocket ship. And so we have Ming Zhao on to give us all of the secrets on how she pulled this off. But Ming, thank you so much for coming on today.
Jim, it's such a pleasure. Really excited to chat with you and your audience.
Yeah, and we've got to chat a little bit before over the years, and I've been able to be kind of a spectator seeing what you're doing. But we're just going to jump into it with the real hard-hitting questions here. But you have gone from idea to, in your first 4 years, you hit $24 million in sales. That's insane. That sounds like something a lot of listeners would like to do. So I want to really kind of unpack that a little bit, because we have a startup studio. We're launching a men's grooming product. We've been working for a year on the formulation, and we're losing money on this. Whereas you have, in 2 years, you were able to make this very impressive. So first, I want to even start how long did that formulation process take before you could even turn the site on to start making money?
Thank you so much, Jim. Yeah, the formulations process, even before that, we didn't go into entrepreneurship, my co-founder and I, with a clear plan of what we're going to do. In fact, we started with our technology. So my co-founder is a computational physicist from Stanford, and I have more of a business background. What we had was an inspiration that skincare as the status quo, where everything is one size fits all. Everything, it's like you walk into a department store and you tell the counter lady, oh, I have this, I have that, this is what I want to deal with. And the counter lady would likely give you a couple of things that says, oh, this thing will do miracles for you, that thing would do miracles for you. They're all very expensive. And then in walks another customer who looks nothing like you, is not your age, doesn't have the same skin issues, nothing, no similarities whatsoever. And the counter lady would again say the same thing, like, this thing is going to be miraculous for you and for you and for you. And that from a biological perspective, the fact that our skin is an organ of the body, and we all have different bodies and different skin, and our differences require a different set of ingredients and treatment and products. Like, that just doesn't make any logical sense to us, and they never did. And that's why we were so frustrated with the market ourselves. We ourselves were customers and also avid consumers and passionate users of skincare products. And we ourselves came upon this sort of crossroads where we just were feeling so frustrated with the industry and with what we needed for ourselves. And that's why we were inspired to start a new way. But even then, in the beginning, we didn't know what we were doing. We all we knew was that we wanted to personalize skincare, and we wanted to use data to do that. So similar to how ChatGPT, has built this conversational AI tool, we also used AI to gather all the scientific literature and evidence and real life evidence there was to skin and the care of skin and the ingredients and whom they do what at what under what circumstance, to first understand skincare. So we gathered all the scientific literature there was, of where there little more than 4,000 peer-reviewed scientific journal articles. We used AI to collate, understand through all of that. And then we also gather all the empirical evidence. So all the people, throughout history who have tried skincare products, what's happened to them. And now we have more than 28 million people, and where they're at, what type of skin they might have, what skin issues they're dealing with, and how have different ingredients, responded to their skin, etc. So starting from that, we call that the Skin Genome Project. And we first built that because, Amy, my co-founder, is a computational physicist, and that's where her strength is in terms of data and AI and understanding data. So we started from there, and we built this database, and we immediately got some accolades around the database. And that's when we decided to turn this into an actual company. And that is around the time that we got into Y Combinator. So we got into Y Combinator with a database at a good level, but without a clear understanding of what the business model of the business would even be. We just knew that something had to change, and this was a good starting point to change that.
Gotcha. So it's so interesting because a lot of people, like in the beauty space or grooming or whatever, it's like, okay, I want to make it a little bit different from what's out there. Let me do a formulation. You all are starting from almost this, to be kind, a data nerd perspective. It's like, let's go deep on understanding this huge data set, because this is wrong and that like everyone's getting this same skincare product. So you have this data set, you get into YC, you are still not a beauty brand yet. You're still figuring out, okay, what's the use case or application to add value to people? And then was it in Y Combinator when you hatched the idea to, okay, this is the best way we can help people is by making personalized skincare products? Is that when it happens?
It's actually a series of serendipitous events that got us to the model and the structure of Proven. So we got into Y Combinator, and by the way, we Amy and I, we're co-founders. As the team is at the time just the two of us. It was the two of us, and our database. As soon as we got into Y Combinator, we realized that we were both pregnant. And we had to have this very interesting conversation with our mentor at Y Combinator and saying, oh, we were a little bit embarrassed to say like, oh, we're sorry, we really mean to focus on our startup, but we happen to be pregnant at this time. And our mentor, who was wonderful, was like, well, you have to consider. And he really had our best interest in mind. And he was, this was back in 2018, and his prognosis was basically, are you trying to build and focus your efforts on building a successful startup at this time via YC, or are you trying to make a statement? Because if we fast forward, at around demo day time, demo day is, the day where all the graduating YC startups present in front of hundreds of, older, almost all male investor set. On demo day, you would both be very visibly, heavily pregnant on stage. One of the few all women founder teams, and you're going to happen to be pregnant. Like that is a statement.
Both pregnant. Yeah.
Both pregnant. That is a statement. That's a bold statement. Or are you trying to get your company off the ground? Because, starting a company is not easy for anybody, right? It's not just for, mom founders or just women founders. It's not easy for male founders either. So on top of all these difficulties, do you want to add another so-called handicap of being two moms who are, both first-time moms and, managing all of this stuff at the same time? They might not say anything, right? Nobody's going to be like, oh, they're pregnant, we're not going to invest in them. Nobody's going to say anything, right? But what are they going to do with their money? So we basically had to make the decision at that time, to then defer YC so that nobody would be the wiser that we had just given birth to newborns when we were in YC.
Yeah.
So, so we would so that's what happened. We waited until after we gave birth so that we can, surreptitiously pretend that we didn't have these handicaps in our lives. And, we would bring these like huge apparatuses of like breast milk pumps to YC with us. And at the time, all of the window offices were made of glass. So there was like nowhere to pump. And we would squeeze into the toilet stalls and just like sit there for like the 12 minutes it takes to like pump. One time I forgot the special bottle that attaches to the apparatus. So I had to grab these like coffee cups and I had to put like pour breast milk into coffee cups and run around these coffee cups full of breast milk, try to look for my mentor and talk about the startup. So it was a very interesting journey in the beginning. But maybe, you know, all of that made it so that, you know, it's actually harder for us to want to quit because of what we've gone through. But YC was certainly a great help in our startup journey. And, you know, after YC, we were mentioned we were featured by TechCrunch as, you know, one of the promising companies coming out of Y Combinator with award-winning technology. And, you know, what technology has really never really been of this caliber, has never really been applied to the beauty, skincare, wellness industry. So we got a nice write-up. And from that write-up, I got a ping on LinkedIn one day from the head of dermatology at Stanford University, who was saying that, oh, you know, I think what you're doing is really innovative, and this is going to be the future of dermatology and skincare, and I want to be a part of it and help you build this. And I was like, this has got to be a scam. Like, I don't think that part of dermatology at Stanford is, you know, pinging me on LinkedIn. And, you know, we went to meet with him at Stanford, and lo and behold, it was him. And we then worked with him together with another award-winning cosmetic formulator, also from Stanford. So that's when we connected the data to real-life dermatological care as well as product formulation. And we then went into, about year and a half, 2 year R&D, beta testing, you know, consumer testing period from 2018 to 2019.
Gotcha. Okay, that's super interesting. I love hearing that kind of linear story of how it evolved and like getting connected with the head of dermatology. But one even comment on the parent component, like, because unfortunately, you're probably right. Like, having kids is a handicap. As someone with 2 kids, like, I used to be able to pull all-nighters and like work forever. But when you have kids, it's like the day stops at 5:17 when I have to go pick up my kid, right? And it's just a different way to work. But I will say, to some extent, it gives you superpowers as far as you become this efficient machine where your kind of give a shit meter changes a little bit as far as what really matters and what doesn't. Like the little BS, you just don't even have time for. And I feel like moms, even more so than dads, have a superpower that's probably like 5x that. But I don't know if you feel like, hey, if I can get through YC with a newborn, like I'm unstoppable, or if you're like, I'm exhausted, I need a vacation.
It's a combination of both. You know, but I definitely agree that having a kid, regardless, you know, what else is going on in your life, does give one superpowers. And I think, you know, one thing I've always felt throughout, you know, the past 5-6 years of starting and running Proven was that, you know, many days in startupdom is just, you know, it's painful, right? It's painful. Ups and downs, very frequently downs. There are days of tedium. There's days of, you know, frustration, and, you know, having something outside of that you care tremendously about, right? That is there and loves you no matter what, you know, regardless of the startup. Certainly, they have no idea what you do, right? Especially in early stages. And to have that kind of constancy and love and care in your life, I think it's actually a secret weapon to being able to continue down a journey that is otherwise very difficult and very painful.
Yeah, and not super rewarding, you know, and a little thankless at times, right? When you're the CEO or the boss, it's like no one's like, hey, you're doing a great job as a CEO today. You know, you don't get a lot of those pats on the back.
That's right. And if you did, then you'd be a little bit suspicious.
What do you want? Yeah, what are you looking for? Okay, so let's keep going down this linear path. This is super fun. So you're like, okay, you're escape velocity out of YC, meet head of dermatology. You go into kind of formulation, product development for 1.5 to 2 years. Talk about like, okay, we have something we're going to launch. Like, how did you get your first 100,000, like that first set of customers? Like what happens there?
Yeah, I would say those first couple of years after YC, there was no escape velocity. It was a grind. We didn't know what we were doing. We were doing R&D. And when you're in R&D, right, there's no validation of what you're doing. You haven't really gotten a chance to test the product. So it's a lot of just continuing and keep on keeping on with blind faith. So there was no escape velocity for some time, and you never really feel escape velocity. All you feel is, there's so much work and things could break, and you're just trying to work and catch up as much as you can. So during that time especially, it was, we would go to the lab with our formulator. We would try this, we would try that, we would try it on ourselves, try it with friends, and send. I have photos of myself and my co-founder Amy, both heavily pregnant and filling bottles and applying labels to bottles. In fact, my apartment in SF at the time, I was living in the Mission with my husband, and we turned our entire apartment into an assembly line for Proven. Once our initial formulations were made with our formulator. So our living room became the formulations lab. We had ingredients, we had bottles, we had hot plates, we had mixing emulsion blenders, and we were doing test batches, and the test batches got bigger and bigger. So one day my husband was like, oh my gosh, I found this emulsion blender that professional chefs use. And it was just a comically large emulsion blender that he was so proud that he got. We got this like cauldron. We were like, witches like making batches of skincare, like a big cauldron with like this emulsion blender.
Oh my gosh.
And then the assembly line goes down, and then with our dining room was a labeling. We had these labelers that kept on breaking down. So it's like Amy, a award-winning data scientist from Stanford, was applying labels to bottles at for months on end.
Yeah, just living the dream. That's why she got that degree, right?
That's right. In like a dingy living room, like heavily pregnant, sitting on like hard benches and labeling. And then her husband and my husband helped out for a little bit in the beginning, where they were helping to fill the bottles and then ship items to USPS, and thinking there must be a smarter way to do this rather than bring like 100 bags of samples to USPS and having the lady at the mail office be mad at him because it's such a bulk order. It should be going through consumer routes. So all of that, it just we didn't know at all what we were doing. We didn't know any of the things that are sort of now seem so basic in terms of starting a company or a products e-commerce company, and that went on for many months. Excuse me.
So, and I love those early days stories. So as you're making these products, like, so you're making, and actually a question before that, did you raise money after YC that's helping fund the R&D, or are you all having to pay for that yourselves, or do you raise friends and family around?
So we raised money after YC. We raised the initial seed round of, I think it was $2.5 million. And, that sounds like a lot of money to any individual, but, to start a company, it really is not a lot of money to start a company, unfortunately. Yeah. So Amy and I basically didn't, take salaries for a while. And, here we are having kids on the way, and we couldn't take a salary. It was a crazy time, but that, got us started, and got us started with R&D and ordering, supplies, ordering bottles, and then initial consumer testing.
Nice. So you're doing consumer testing. You're getting confident you have something. When do you go live with this, where you start getting your first orders that aren't from friends and family, or it's a ghost account that's yourself?
Yeah. So we went to a couple of women's events in San Francisco. There were at that time sort of supporting female founder as a topic was just starting. So we certainly appreciate that a lot, because we stand on the shoulder of giants for a lot of these women that turn around and want to help. So we basically took our wares, our sample products, our personalized skin quiz with us on the road, to these different women's events, to try to learn about, what people like, what didn't. But you know what? I don't think we learned that much during that period of time, even though we were doing all of this, right? Because people want to support you. They'll say, oh, everything is great, but I don't know if we knew the truth at that time. I don't think we knew the truth until we started to, basically run ads and test the products with strangers. Do you really know, if you have legs?
Yeah. And that actually helps you see if this is scalable too. And one thing people should do, like, really go to the Proven website. There is a really impressive skin quiz on there, where you can get your kind of custom formula that I think is really best in class. And so you're kind of going to market, not really with a product, but with, take this quiz to get your custom formula. And are your ads, so would you say to get to that first level of growth, was it all on the back of paid on Facebook and Instagram and leaning into your point of differentiation, which is the science? It's you and your co-founder and getting that custom formula. Was that really what kind of helped get those first 1,000 customers?
It was numerous things. It was trying all different kinds of messaging, including those messaging. It was trying to get our friends and family to start to support us. Although in the beginning, I think we were a little bit embarrassed about our initial products to really do too much of that. And then about our products, about our processes. Although even now, some of our friends still say that they miss those formulations that we made in our, that they knew were made in our house, and now, not at the professional labs that they're now made in, that are, FDA accredited and everything. But I really think it was just continuing. I don't know if I can pinpoint to a couple of things that helped us get to the initial 1,000 customers. I would just say it's just continuous testing, talking to potential customers, even though some of these organizations, some of these events that we went to with female founders and like VCs, some of them were pretty snooty. Like we would like try to get them to fill out our, personalized skin quiz. And they'd just be like, what is this? This is so janky. And we're like, oh my gosh, like be female supporting female. This is not making me feel very supported at all. We're trying to like do things. So, it's not a joke, but a lot of them treat it like a joke. So you also have that, but continuing, despite that, continuing. And then we eventually, I think, hired a marketer who helped to start to test ads, right? And that is what really starts the engine, is like starting to understand what it takes to get a business off the ground, and understanding, okay, it's the messaging, it's the value propositions, it's the images that you use. And that's when we can actually become tactical about how to steer this business the right way.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you're doing offline things to talk to people to get feedback, which you're like, that's kind of helpful, but wasn't significantly helpful. Really, as you start doing paid, you're honing in on the messaging, the images that work. What's kind of that next level? Because what I'm trying to understand is like 0 to 24 million in 2 years. And it, like, there's a lot of, as I talk to other D2C founders that have hit scale, a lot of them are like, we rode Facebook and Instagram ads till like 40 million or 50 million. Others, they would diversify like 5 to 10 million as they go to partner channels. Because as I look at your product and the way people get it with the formula, I mean, you guys kind of are black belts as far as like digital marketing and online acquisition. What are the other things you had to bolt on for growth to hit that scale? Or was it just becoming first class at paid acquisition?
So I would say the initial point of that is figuring out what could be a win, right? Because some people, I know some consumer companies are geniuses at getting organic, let's say, blog mentions. That's how Stitch Fix and Lisa Mattress, that's how they really exploded, right? Just being able to, just having that superpower of getting organic mentions. Others have, some companies rode PR to stardom. for us, we didn't really have either of those superpowers. So, but we tried everything. We tried to get organic mentions. We tried to get a lot of PR. We tried digital marketing. We tried, writing some content ourselves. And it turns out in the beginning, what made a big difference for us was paid ads via Facebook. Instagram actually didn't work well for us. And then, starting to build up Google as well. So as soon as we knew that would at least get us off the ground, right? It's like none of this is like saying, okay, well, in the future, this is how we're going to get to whatever 100 million. Like you can't have that kind of foresight. You just say, okay, well, this is driving 2 customers today versus the other is driving 0. Well, then let's invest more. And can we get to 10? Like we used to have a ping on our Slack. Every time we got an order, it would ping everybody on the team. And all like 4 of us, we get so excited because we would get, I think maybe at that time we would have 6 people. We would get so excited. And I was just like, I just want 10 orders a day. Just ping me 10 times a day. And then eventually it was like, I just want 20. Oh my gosh, if I got to 20, I would just be so happy. And then, thankfully, eventually we had to turn the ping off. But I think in the early days, it's not saying, okay, this is how we're going to grow. It's going out, testing all of the different potential channels, and then seeing what responds. It's kind of like, you would think that going to all these kind of female events in a, high income city of high disposable income women would jumpstart a business. But that wasn't what jumpstarted the business. It was other efforts. So, so you can't sort of try to predetermine that. You have to test and learn into it.
Gotcha. One like big takeaway that is really cool to hear is like, it's easy for people to read headlines like, oh, wow, proven, just like they've got it all figured out. They're just this rocket ship. But I love this point that you're like, we tried a lot of things, a lot didn't work, but like, this isn't sports in the sense that like you have to shoot 70% from the free throw line. You really need one thing to work really well that can scale and you can write it. And I think the fact that you all were willing to put yourselves out there, test things, be okay with it not working. But once you find something, really kind of double down into that. It's funny. My wife, she gave me kind of a backhanded compliment the other day where she was like, we were talking about something and she's like, oh yeah, you'd be great at that. You're really good at like getting rejected. And I was like, wait, what do you mean? She's like, yeah, as a business owner, you're always getting rejected and failing. I was like, thank you, I think. But I love that you kind of call that out and you're not just like, oh yeah, we did this. It was easy. Because I'm always impressed with CEOs that are kind of secretly good marketers where they're just trying to make noise every single week and month, knowing that not everything's going to work.
Absolutely. I mean, you hear so many stories, right? Like, I think we've all heard of stories of how, early days, Airbnb, they hacked, right? They hacked Craigslist to get all of their initial traffic. I bet it wasn't because of, Brian Chesky waking up one day and saying, this is how I'm going to get to $1 billion company, right? He must have tested like 100 different things. I mean, he must have tested all kinds of things like paid or whatever to get to this one, the one weird trick, right? It wasn't like a grand design of arriving at a one weird trick. So I think that is the only way, you need to find your own path.
Yeah. That's such a good point. Another thing that it's a big takeaway is, you all really invested in making a great product because the beauty industry it's a knife fight. It's so competitive. However, people they're price insensitive and they're willing to test other products and brands to be right for them. And I think that's huge. And what's beautiful is the business model, you have the 3-step skincare routine that's, $130 every 2 months or $200 every 2 months. Your lifetime value is amazing. Any advice you could give to people when you're trying to find those early adopters or fast followers that would be willing to switch to proven or to test it out? Was it about that messaging of like, okay, let's talk about the problem that they're still not solving with the other products or the features we have, or like, what were you able to do to really speak to them in a way where they're like, all right, I'm interested in trying this product?
Yeah. Even for that, it was a result of a lot of testing. In fact, when we first had our products, we decided based on our dermatologist formulations recommendations is that, we wanted to have all the necessary skincare ingredients and skincare products in a system, but without a lot of the unnecessary things. So we launched with a core system of personalized cleanser, personalized night cream, and personalized day moisturizer with SPF. But we didn't know that we should bundle them together to sell them. We had to test into that, right? We had to test into that to know that, well, when you use all those products together and they have the synergistic effect and they are, everything a foundational skincare system, a person needs for a foundational skincare system, they have better results, and therefore repeat purchase is also better. So, and even the price point too, all of that took a lot of testing, and I mean years of testing. And even now we're still testing all of them. And I think that is one of the superpowers that having a co-founder who's a data scientist affords us. So it wasn't just that we started with a database that's AI powered for our product. Certainly that is a key point of differentiation. But that data understanding is infused through everything that we do, so that we're constantly watching, what people are doing on our site, how people are responding to our products, how long they're staying. And that data is what gives us feedback as to say, okay, so this test is successful, that test is not. We're constantly A/B testing basically everything, which allows us to go forward without being blind, because you're basically taking all of these steps blind. What is the price point? Blind. What is the is it bundles? Is it individual products? Blind. But only with data can you get that feedback from customers, kind of like discovering your marketing channel in the beginning. All of this should be well tested.
And is most of this testing, is it happening on like paid platforms because it's the fastest way to get feedback? Or is it a hybrid of like, okay, we're testing pricing and positioning through ads? Or is it like you're doing offline things? Or are there other, just so as people hear you say testing, how can they tactically apply that?
I think for the very fundamental things, first of all, we weren't that sophisticated. We weren't like, oh, we have this testing pod and that testing pod. We had one, we had one funnel. Everybody was coming to this one funnel, and we either tested that funnel or we didn't, So, and also I think for these fundamental things, you don't want to have it be unduly influenced by any factors that you might not know of, right? So it's like pricing, if it's bundling or not. You do that on your main channel, and you make sure that the result that you get, which is going to affect the future of your business, is the result. I remember when we first launched, there was no subscription skincare company that we knew of. We just didn't, nobody thought that skincare could be a subscription category. We had never seen that before. Nobody's ever seen that before. So we didn't launch with subscription products. We launched with one-time purchase products. And then customers would email us and say, hey, I love the products. I want to keep getting that. Is there any way we could get the products without having to retake this quiz? And we were like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe we could have subscription products because people are loving the products. So we very gingerly, very, again, in a sort of like an embarrassed way, offered subscription, but we didn't want to scare people away. So we didn't even do it on the main purchase page. We did it on the thank you page because, again, we were very like, nervous about, scaring away the 20 customers that were coming in.
Yeah.
So we were like, oh, now that you've bought, are you interested in subscribing? Now we'll give you a little discount. And if you don't like it, you can always cancel it on the thank you page, which, most people don't even look at, right? You just like click out after you check out. But that's how we then initially saw that, hey, people were willing to subscribe. And then, hey, people, after they subscribe, a small percentage of people subscribe, but they stayed. So then we, moved that subscription question further to the front and then further to the front and becoming more of a forefront. So all of that is kind of like a lot of these steps that seem, now company making, that literally are what makes the company sustainable and able to subsist as a company and even thrive as a company. A lot of those were really small steps that arrived at that, and maybe sometimes serendipitous steps as well.
Yeah. That's really helpful feedback. And one thing, like with a lot of like beauty brands we'll work with, it's all about that activation offer. It's like, okay, here's the free quiz, and they'll struggle with, okay, do we do like this bundle and give them a discount, or do we give them a free sample? Do we give them a product for free? And even with our own grooming product, we're looking at doing some really aggressive experiments where it's like, hey, this business model is retention based, and that if they like the product, the lifetime value is going to be strong. So we're down to break even or maybe lose a little bit of money on that first transaction, knowing we'll make it up on the back end. And I know like some competitors in the space will be as aggressive as that. Is that something you all have played with, or you're like, actually, we don't have to do that because of our reputation? But I don't know how you think through that, and like how you think through customer acquisition costs with a great business model with lots of repeat purchases.
These are all, I don't think these are all black and white questions. I think these are all questions, some of them are value.
I want the answers. I want the playbook. Yeah.
And we're still wrestling with a lot of them, even before we launched. I remember talking to a prospective investor, and he was like, you must do, sample sets. You must do free sample sets. You get them with a free sample set, and then you make them buy the next set. And that's how you get them. And we didn't do it, not because we didn't think it was a good idea, but because operationally it was too challenging for personalized products. We already have so many SKUs because it's, tailored to individuals. And if we do sample sets, it just, it's such a huge operational challenge for a small company, even now. So we just never did them. So we just basically had to grit our teeth and brute force our way into initial acquisitions. But thankfully, the products and the value proposition worked so that we could get started with just a full, like, here's $129 if you subscribe product. And, people had been so frustrated with the status quo products in the industry that they were willing to buy it. And then once they tried it and it worked, they were willing to continue to buy it. So, I think we were lucky in that the products were that good, and the industry was that previously not serving customers well.
Yeah. That's such a great anecdote on that. And you're right, it's so gray. Everybody wants the secret hack, but you're exactly right. So, I mean, okay, so you go from idea to 24 million in 2 years. You've raised VC money, and people listening probably know this, but like when you raise VC money, they have aggressive goals of an eventual exit or an IPO to 10x their money. How do you think about like the future of Proven, and like what is that goal? It's like, hey, we're good. We're not going to raise more. We can have a great outcome for everybody. We want to do this for the long term. Or like, how do you all think through, what does the next 3 to 5 years look like? And like, what does the growth strategy look like for that?
I have to say, so after YC, after raising the seed round, right? Many of those investors in the seed round, we're used to companies that like, they invest after YC, and then like, 2 quarters later, right, they're worth this and worth that. We weren't that. As I mentioned, after YC, we still spent like a good 18 months on R&D, during which time a lot of these investors are like, what have you guys been doing? There's nothing to show here. And it's like, for my whatever, $100,000, what do I get? Just like, 100 formulas? Like, that's not what I bought. And I think it was a very frustrating time to continue to hear that, right? So yeah, I think it's, you really have to, if possible, in the beginning, think about what path you want to be on. I think for us, eventually, after finding our way, somewhat, maybe we did redeem ourselves in their eyes, but it didn't really matter, right? Because we obviously care about the company and its success much more than any investor could, right? Because they're basically out there like spraying their, they're diversifying their money across many different investments, because they know that many of those will fail. Whereas, for founders, for the team, for everybody who's day in, day out working on it, right? This is your life's work. This is your other baby. So, obviously you care a lot more than they do. And at the end of the day, I think it's, putting in a good effort and trying to make it as good of an opportunity and situation as possible. And that's what they're buying, and not necessarily sort of, what happens at this time frame, what happens at that time frame. Like, it doesn't work like that in life.
Yeah. Gotcha. So yeah, it's like, yes, you care about investors, obviously, but it's like no one cares more than you guys as far as like where
Right.
you want to go with this.
Exactly. And also, sorry, I forgot what I was going to say.
No, all good. I know it's going to be enlightening, but that's okay. So I'm always interested, it's a question I like to ask people. What is the nicest thing anyone's done for you in your professional career?
I would say it's actually some of our team members. In fact, one of our founding engineers has been with Proven since the very beginning. So, 6 years. And one of our lead designers also. In the earlier days when we were all in my living room, I used to sit next to this designer and basically micromanage her screen next to her and say, okay, now move this thing here, move this thing there, like for days on end. Now thankfully, I'm sure she's thankful that I no longer do that. And then same thing with our founding engineer. In fact, a lot of this testing that I mentioned, right? We have a skin genome quiz that was created by our dermatologist that simulates how a dermatologist evaluates a person. And then once that diagnostic quiz is completed, we then show people their personalized products. And that is what we call our congrats page. It's basically like, congrats, you've finished your skin genome quiz, and here's what you get, your personalized skincare system that's, right for you. And that congrats page, I'm not being facetious. It's probably gone through more than 1,000 iterations. And in the early days, I literally, after the day's end, I would sit next to the engineer, who was not a front-end engineer, by the way. He's a data engineer. And he and I would change font, change color, change image, move things around. And we would do that for 45 minutes every day, and then look at the numbers overnight. And then next morning, okay, say, let's do this again. This language worked. This CTA button worked. This color of the CTA, this font size of the CTA. Let's add a little lock, on next to some CTAs, all of those things. And we used to do that for weeks on end. And that is what sort of 0.1% improvement at a time got us to a reasonable, sustainable conversion rate. And because he cared so much that he would launch these tests every night. So he would, sit with me from 6 to 7 to make these micro changes. And then at midnight, he would then deploy these changes, because even though we had so little traffic, he was like, oh, I don't want people who are coming in after dinner or whatever to find a website that's not working. So he would stay up until midnight to deploy every night. And that's a dedication that, that without that, without him and our designer, without them, Proven wouldn't be what it is today. And I wouldn't be, continue to be a CEO.
Yeah. It's it's so obvious, but it's so important. It's you're only as good as the people around you, and finding those A players that actually care about the quality of work is everything, especially in those early days, because it's so fragile. You're just like a house of cards. You're keeping it together. So that's a really good story.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't know when we can start to not feel like a house of cards. I think that's a founder right. syndrome, that you always feel like this startup baby is like a newborn. You never feel like it's it's like a 5-year-old company. You never feel that way. You're just like, oh my gosh, if I just let any little thing down, right, it could just die. But maybe it's not that fragile, right? But that's maybe the paranoid survive, and that's that's how we are.
I do, yeah, because the second you take your foot off the gas, it's oh, I'm slipping. It's I'm not scrutinizing those things, and that's what got you to this point. And it's kind of there's the wartime CEO, the peacetime CEO. I'm not good in peacetime. I'll get too comfortable. I kind of need a fire in a crisis, which probably isn't healthy. But it's so funny to hear you say oh, are we still a house of cards? Because on the outside, it's looking pretty stable to me, but yeah, it's always, the grass is always greener, I guess.
But Jim, how much of that is mental versus for reals? I don't know.
Yeah. And well, that's a good question. I recently joined a peer group with other founders and CEOs, and That has been so helpful because things like imposter syndrome are very real, and it's with people you would not expect. And just be able to
Mm,
compare notes helps you be like, oh, okay, wow, this is real. And also, like, we did this talk or this thing on like the psychology of money and how you
mm.
were raised, if you did or didn't come from it, has a huge impact on how you run your business. And there's a lot of things where I'm like, wow, I didn't even realize I was doing that. But you're
Mm,
a lot of it's kind of in your head.
yeah. For me personally, I'm not sure if I shared yet. So I'm an immigrant to the US. I myself am an immigrant, as in my family and I moved from China to the US when I was 12 years old, so about eighth grade. And we moved because we had no idea what America was like, what the culture was like. My parents didn't know anything about America. They just knew that it would create a better future, for me and
Mhm.
for their progeny. Um, and I could escape the, relentless competition of, a billion people trying to better themselves. So we moved to South Florida, of all places, for, a Chinese family that didn't speak any English. So I was in ESOL for many years when I first got here. ESOL is English as a second language, where
Oh
they
yeah.
put the immigrant kids there to help them assimilate, which is so wonderful. I'm so grateful to these programs that try to help immigrants and give us a chance to have real contributing lives. And because I was in South Florida, the ESOL program was full of mostly Spanish speaking kids, from like Puerto
Mhm.
Rico and Panama and, Haiti, etc. And I actually first learned Spanish before I learned English, because
Oh
all of my,
wow.
friends in school were speaking Spanish to each other. But, with that immigrant spirit and also entrepreneurial spirit, I'm actually a third generation entrepreneur. My father and grandfather both started companies in China
Mhm.
in different ways. Um, I actually mainstreamed really quickly through that program, through school, and like 4 or 5 years after moving to the U.S. without speaking English, I got a perfect score on my SAT verbal and got a scholarship to go to college, and then eventually went on to go to Harvard Business School, and then becoming an entrepreneur myself.
Is that why you're such an overachiever then? Are you like overcompensating? It's like that's why you're going to Harvard and YC. Is that the root of it?
It's entirely impossible that because I moved here in my formative years, right, as a teenager, like
Yeah.
that's a sensitive time, I think, to do
Oh,
anything,
that's
right?
such
To
an
do
eighth
anything,
grade. Oh my gosh, that's
right?
so formative. Yeah.
And I had this like stupid Chinese haircut with my uncool Chinese clothes and shoes, right? So I definitely had to figure out a way to not feel bad about myself. So,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
entirely possible. But, now I see my daughter, right? She's 5, and she is, I'm so thankful that she doesn't have to deal with a lot of things I had to deal with as a child, right? Or as an immigrant. And, I wonder, do I want to give her this sort of pressure to perform, or do I just want her to simply have an easy, simple life? And I think I'm actually leaning towards the latter. I have the life I have, and I enjoy what I'm doing, but
Mhm.
I want her to not feel as much pressure to have to be excellent at everything.
Man, yeah, because we were talking before we recorded, we both have girls, we both have a 5-year-old girl as well. And it's tough because like I see parents, it's like they're doing all the things, they're doing all the lessons. And it's like, am I gonna go down that path and like
Right.
just push, push, push? Or it's like, let them be a kid, let them do those things, and just like, how do we just create a lot of laughs and smiles and like not to be
Yes.
like all warm and fuzzy and everyone gets a consolation prize, but it's kind of tough as you kind of figure that out because what's right for you or what worked for you is that the right thing for this kid? And it's man, it's a tough thing to balance and navigate.
Yeah. I mean, now that I'm not in Silicon Valley, I still go on LinkedIn and I read a lot of the, thought process that people have. And I think a lot of that is, unhealthy for ourselves too, even as adults. It's like, here is my plan to how I, grind and hustle all day, every day. I wake up at 5, I take a cold ice shower, and then I,
Yeah.
do inversion therapy, and then I run 100 miles and I come back and I don't talk to any, it's like, well, what to what end, right? To what end are you doing all of this? Like, is this what life is meant to be? Like, the birds are flying free. And, I think our lives are probably worth more than birds. And why are we enslaving ourselves? And that's not how it's meant to be.
I know. I stare at this Zoom link way too much. It's like, I gotta grow. But yeah, it's a tough balance. I feel like we need a whole other podcast getting to our psychology of parenting and whatnot. But
right, and psychology of life and achievement, all of that.
Yeah. Well, especially as you like build something and grow, it's like yes, it's fun to have that, but it's like if you don't have a good happy house and people around you, like it doesn't matter. So
absolutely.
But yeah.
That's the psychology I try to bring to Proven too, right? Because you just mentioned earlier about founders, about VCs and what their expectations are, right? And they might have a set of expectations for Proven. And I think in the early days, I had, I was very influenced by that, right? Because that was the sort of prevailing thought process in Silicon Valley, that you just push growth as much as you can. And now, certainly growth matters, but because when I look at my daughter, who's I have two babies. I have my daughter, I have Proven. When I look at my daughter, right, I'm not thinking growth at all costs. Like, you must grow taller. Every day I measure you. I have a dashboard. Are you gaining weight? Are you eating
taller, bigger, smarter?
Right. Yeah. Right. Or are you getting smarter? Like, let me count your vocabulary. I'm not doing that because I want her to enjoy her life and I want to enjoy her as well. Right. And same thing with Proven. Like, I care so much about it. Right. It's my second baby. And so in some ways that now it's sort of taking shape. Should I just let it organically, continue to take shape on its own rather than say, I must force it to have this and that? And it's not fair, right? It's not fair to have these kind of expectations on an entity at all times, right? Like, I'm certainly gonna keep working as hard as I can and bring the best people on. But at some point, right, it's beyond your control. At some point, you can only give it the best ingredients and feed it with the best nutrients. And then some things outside of that are not under your control, and, to learn to be okay with that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I struggle with sometimes, like, I want to have the most amazing company culture that people want to be here for a long time. But if your NPS score is a little too high, you're making something a little too lax or cush. Whereas I want to put the right amount of pressure on, but not to burn people out. Right. So it's kind of this fine line in trying to balance that. So, it's Absolutely. Something we try and think through a lot. Like, oh yeah, you can work remotely. You don't have meetings on Fridays, but we have aggressive goals. And so it's like, how do you do that? I haven't landed the plane or figured it out, but we're trying to. So yeah.
How I think about that is, one of our values is love your work and live your life. So we have a lot of people with families with kids, and we're a remote company. So we do have, very high standards for our team members. As you can imagine, we're a fast growing company, but also a very lean team. I think last year, 2022, we hit more than 35 million in revenue with about 30 full-time staff. So that's a pretty lean ratio. So we certainly have high standards of our staff, but we want to make sure that they're thriving, not just at work, but also outside, which means we try to not have, unnecessary meetings, which means we try to keep everything so that, if you're performing, you're doing well, like, we don't need to, waste your time with other things. We don't ping you on weekends. We don't ping you, after 6, etc. So it's basically like trying to hire the best people, like true professionals and experts at what they do, and then sort of setting them free to do their good job, and then letting them go home to, the things outside of work in their lives.
Yeah. We might have to steal that core value. What you said, love your work, live your life. Is that what you said?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay. All right. We might be adding that as a core value because it's so true and that embodies it really well.
Thank you.
Well, cool. Well, Ming, I know we've got
a work in process.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it's going pretty well, but I cannot thank you enough for the time, and I know we've gone over, but this has been really fun, and it's so fun to watch what you're building and what you all are doing. Where can we point people if they want to learn more about Proven or more about you and what you're doing? Where can they go?
Yes, please check us out at provenskincare.com, Proven skincare.com, and get your own personalized skincare system that's just right for you.
Yeah. And even just from like a growth and conversion rate optimization perspective, their site is a masterpiece. So go check it out and then get your skincare products. So absolutely. But Ming, thank you so much for the time today. This was a blast and look forward to talking more.
Thank you so much, Jim. Have a good one.
You too.